Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an entitled Karen harasses an army veteran at a restaurant and claims that he is just pretending to be disabled. She then decides to pull off the veteran's prosthetic leg so her dumb brats can play with it. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. Today was our anniversary, to be exact our 10th year anniversary of our wedding. My wife was dressed beautifully in a blue dress that fell past her ankles, slightly dragging against the ground with a beautiful pearl necklace. I had never seen her this happy since our wedding day. She was always beautiful in my eyes, but today she looked even more beautiful than ever. Our plan was relatively simple: to celebrate our anniversary, spend a day with one another, particularly going to a fancy restaurant. I was spoiling my wife, but I did not have a problem with going all out for such a special occasion. Before we left for the restaurant, I ensured that my leg was connected tightly because I served in the army for over 10 years. My wife and I were married the entire time. When I was deployed to Afghanistan to fight in the war, I lost my leg. I remember it so vividly the minute I lost it. However, I try my best not to dwell upon the loss, especially on days like this. Nonetheless, we live a life of practicality. I still have work to attend to, working for a writing company where I do have to travel to work in the morning, working a 9 to 5. My wife is rather independent, working for her own company that sells handmade soaps and perfumes. We have a dog named Baxter, who is a retired military dog. He is a sweet old pit bull with the best life he could dream of. My wife practically spends all her money on him, buying him the best treats and making sure that when we are away, such as on days like this, he is still living a good life. We were quickly checked into our reservation, our booth being dead by a beautiful window with a scenic view. I immediately took notice of the screaming child attempting to be comforted by his mother. She looked as if she sincerely did not want to be here. Nonetheless, my wife and I got seated in our booth, sitting patiently until a waiter came over to deliver us our drinks. Out of nowhere, the young boy was no longer situated in his mother's arms, rather tied at the front of our table. My wife immediately smiled, waving at the young boy, before his mother could come and pick him up. "But I want to look out the window!" Screaming and kicking, his mother gave us a death glare. "You know, if you hadn't reserved the seat, my son would not be screaming right now." "Excuse me?" Staring down the woman, she looked even more frustrated than she had before. "I bet you're just crippled." She was referring to my leg. "Useless piece of..." Before she could finish her sentence, I cut her off, standing up and pointing a finger into her face. I was furious. "Don't you talk to me or my wife like that." I was steaming red in the face, smoke blowing out of my ears, kind of angry. People were now staring at us, watching to see who would win. Eventually, the Karen stomped away alongside her child. From there, my wife and I attempted to enjoy our lunch, chatting about the women in small whispers. We were trying our best for her to not overhear us, and yet she must have heard us as I watched her come storming back over. "Give it to me!" Confused, I looked down to where her hand was gesturing to. "Give what to you?" "Your leg. My children wanted the window seat and you took it from them. They deserve to have something to play with." Astounded by what the Karen was saying, I held onto my leg, clutching it against the seat. With a look of disgust, the Karen continued to argue with my wife and I, calling me fake disabled. I assured her I definitely was not faking my disability, but she was in no mood to come to terms with such a statement. "That's it!" Storming away back to her table, the Karen grabbed up one of her utensils. Coming back towards me, my wife screamed in horror as the woman held the fork above her head, aiming it directly towards me. People were now rushing out of their seats to help, but it was too late. The woman dove under the table, slamming the fork into my other non-disabled leg, the pegs of the fork pushing cleanly through. "What the hell?" Biting my lip from the pain, I felt as the blood dripped down my leg, oozing from the cut the Karen had made. Karen then tried to screw with my prosthetic while I was screaming in pain. She managed to pull it out and threw it to her kids. The restaurant was now going crazy and patrons seemed to freak out at Karen, and she seemed to be getting scared as well, slowly realizing what she had done. Coming out from under the table, my vision was blurry as I watched the woman attempt to grab her children and run. But security had come by then, blocking her way. As her children screamed and cried, security pushed the Karen to the floor, crushing her almost. Other guests ran over to me, and one saying that she was a medic, saying I needed to place pressure on the wound after she removed the fork from the side of my leg. Luckily, she was capable of doing it with ease without too much pain either. She grabbed a bunch of napkins, placing it against my leg and applying a large amount of pressure against it. Soon, the sound of sirens could be heard in the background. Even as my ears rang, I could hear them. The police and an ambulance arrived soon afterwards, drowning out even the loudest of ringing within my ears. I watched as red and blue lights flashed outside and police rushed inside, an ambulance team taking over and thanking the woman for her help before they could get there. In the end, my wife had to recap what happened for me as I passed out a few times. She explained that the police asked her a lot of questions, thereafter arresting the Karen, taking away her children in a family member's car. I was taken to the hospital and treated for my wounds. Luckily, the injuries would not affect me long term, but they surely would leave a mark that both my wife and I would remember vividly. In the end, my wife and I found out that the Karen would be serving 2 years and an extensive amount of community work. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I am glad that in the end at least Karen got some kind of punishment for her incredibly stupid actions. What is it with these people that don't believe others that they are disabled and then even attack them? That is just so crazy. Either way, if you enjoy these stories, then please don't forget to like the video because that would help me tremendously. Either way, let's continue with the next one. The next one is titled, Neighbor is trying to acquire a strip of my property through adverse possession. TN. I purchased a house in TN last June 2019. And by the way guys, this is an older thread from r/legal advice and I found it really interesting and we have not read it before. One of the main things I planned on doing was installing a privacy fence since I am next to a busy street and there is a lot of foot traffic on the sidewalk. I got a fence contractor out in September to measure the corners of the lot. When I showed them where the plat on the official government records were, my neighbor came out and tried to tell me that it was their portion of the lawn. Though I disagreed, I decided to wait for the fence and get a survey done. It took a lot longer to get a property surveyor than I originally expected and finally got it finished in May. The survey showed that I was correct. After trying to disprove the survey and failing, my neighbor is suing for a 12 by 50 strip of land using adverse possession. Their thought is that since they've been caring for the land for 20 years, that it is now theirs. They have not paid tax on the strip of land and have no structures on it. Do they have a fair claim to the land? A user in the comments said, the burden is on your neighbor to prove 20 years of actual exclusive, open and notorious use. Has your neighbor been photographing the property since 2000? Are there 20-year residents of the area who can testify to your neighbor's claim? Number 2, mowing the lawn is not enough for adverse possession. You have to establish an open, notorious and exclusive use of the subject property. Building a structure or a fence is the typical scenario. Mowing the lawn is perhaps relevant evidence, but that alone should not carry the day. Either way, update to the story. Thank you for everyone that originally replied. We followed the original advice to get our title company to help with the case, but they ended up not helping. We had to hire a lawyer and the whole process took over 2 years due to the pandemic delays. Several of the cited cases were used in our case. Over 2 years ago, my household was served with an adverse possession claim by my neighbor. The dispute began 3 months after we purchased our home. We had to go to court, which ended up being 2+ years after being served. The judge ruled in our favor. Some details about the case though. The neighbor was able to prove that they had mowed the piece of property for 20 years, which we did not and could not dispute. They had landscapers testify of the constant boundaries maintained in their contracts. Our verbal dispute over the property line occurred 19 years and 363 days after our neighbor moved into their property, meaning the 20-year adverse possession window would not work. The piece of property was considered relatively small because it is part of a residential property. This proved to be the strongest element to win us the case. In TN there is precedent that when the property is relatively small, the property cannot be claimed via adverse possession if even structures are on the property. Lastly, while proving they had mowed the lawn, they could not prove that they had exclusive use over the land. This is one of the strict bright line tests of TN adverse possession that the neighbor could not prove. Either way, the next one is titled The Icy Car. So in this next story, for various reasons, I went to a boarding school in Pennsylvania for sophomore through senior year of high school. Nothing criminal, mental health issues and learning disabilities that the regular school was not equipped to handle at the time. One of the dorm monitor guys was a royal butthole. Any day he was on duty was hell. He would stick you with "on campus only", aka grounded for the littlest thing, and complaining about it got you inside, have to be visible, cannot hide in your room, even to do homework etc. until bedtime. The typical "I'm in charge" bullying BS. One year he got bad news right after we got back from Thanksgiving. A family member on the other side of the country was in bad shape, so he had to go take care of them. We never got the exact details. He lived in a crappy neighborhood and did not trust his car to be in one piece when he got back. So he asked the school administrators if he could leave his car at the school while he was away for about 6 weeks. They let him, the only stipulation being that he had to leave the keys with maintenance so they could move the car if the parking area needed plowing. He parked his car on the grass around the side of our dorm the second week of December and then left. He did not get back until the end of January because the dorm was full of teenagers. They spigots didn't have regular handles on them. Instead, they used a strange square key that was kept in the office and was only used with permission from the dorm monitors. However, a pair of flat-ended pliers worked well to turn the water on. We hid a hose in the bedroom closest to the car, which was also right next to a spigot. The kid who was supposed to be in that room slept elsewhere, so he would not get woken by someone coming in every 20 to 30 minutes, unrolling the hose, hooking it up, turning on the water, giving the car a good misting, and rolling up the hose again. Every day, from the minute we got back from the classes to the minute we had to leave the next morning, that car got misted. We even got help from a couple of kids in our classes who lived close enough to bike over during Christmas vacation. One even showed up with a lawn chair and a book so he could just stay there and mist it again as soon as the last layer had frozen over. No staff were in any of the school buildings during vacations, so he didn't get caught. In the middle of the night, 2 days after we got back from Christmas vacation, I was one of the 2 people on duty with the hose when the monitor for that night comes outside for a cigarette. We did not know he smoked, so we thought he was in the office, which was on the other end of the building. He sees me with the pliers in hand and asks, "Did you forget something?" and holds out the spigot key. That is when we realized just how much this a-hole was disliked. That monitor actually offered to help ice A-hole's car during the day while we were in classes. By the time A-hole got back, the car was encased in a block of ice. The ice had to be at least 3 inches thick. When he complained to the administrators, they told him that because he had not dropped off the keys, everyone had assumed he had changed his mind about leaving the car there. When he went to try to get his car out of the ice, he could not just attack it with a hammer. Doing so would break every window and destroy the paint job. The only way to get rid of the ice was the same way it went on, slowly. He tried using a small blowtorch, but that did not work because he got too impatient and tried to put the torch right against the ice, which kept putting it out. He got the smart idea of hooking a hose to the dorm's hot water heater. It was stalled at first because all the hoses on campus miraculously disappeared. Who needs a hose in PA in the middle of January? Then he was told he could only do it while we were in class because we needed the hot water for showers in the morning and evening plus the dishwasher. That did not work too well because he had a regular job. He had to be at Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Weekends were out because we had to do our laundry. The line, "The tank can barely keep up," was our favorite. He ended up running back and forth with a couple of tea kettles melting channels so he could chisel out the ice between them. We kept turning the burner off when he left the kitchen. He then stopped working for the school at the end of June. Added to answer some questions, why was this so easy for us to do and so hard for him to undo? He put the car on the north side of the building, almost zero sun compounded by bitter cold. We could not have asked for a better setup. How long did it take him to release his car? Well, he would pour warm water so that it would melt a channel, pour some more to melt another, and then chisel out the stuff in between with a screwdriver. Maintenance would not let him chisel, and he was too cheap to buy one just for this. Depending on where he was working, it would come off in big flakes, which was about the size of a playing card but no more than 1/3 the thickness of a deck. He could only work on it when he was not on shift, which was 10 to 15 minutes in the morning after we went to class but before he went to his other job. And then another half hour or so at night, after we were supposed to be in bed but before he had to go home to get some sleep. So around Valentine's Day he finally got it to the point that he could get it towed to a local car wash that would keep it indoors long enough for all the ice to melt. However, we had made damn sure to freeze it to the ground. He had no friends who would do it for him, big surprise, and he did not trust us any farther than he could throw us. When did he quit? When the school semester was over in June. He had a contract with the school, he could not quit early without a good reason, and they did not really want to fire him. If he had left, they would have had to go get another door monitor to cover his shifts, which would mean paying overtime hours or get someone new, finding someone, full background checks, certain minimum training requirements, etc. It would be expensive no matter what. Why no salt, heaters, etc.? He is a cheap guy. Enough said. Did we get in any trouble? Nope. All, and I mean all, the staff vouched for us. One gave us even the spigot key. Either way, the next one is titled, "Should have told me that you have guests." So, a few years ago, I was renting a small 2-bedroom place with my brother. He was very social, had lots of friends, while I was more introverted. So he would often bring friends, I often had never met these people before, over to hang out with him and us, while I rarely, almost never did so. Since in the summer it was extremely hot and we didn't have any AC, it was pretty common that we would both just hang out in our underwear as a way to beat the heat. Especially myself, as I'm a bigger guy who generates his own heat. In the winter, I'm like a radiator and people will sit beside me just to absorb my extra heat. It's important to remember that we both did this on a pretty much daily basis, so it was never a surprise that one or the other of us was mostly undressed at any given time. So I would be hanging out in my underwear watching TV or playing video games, and my brother would walk in with anywhere from 2 to 4 people, pre-pandemic, and I would just get up and put on a t-shirt and shorts and then sometimes come back out to hang out with everyone, depending on my mood. After they left, I would tell my brother, "Hey, I don't care if you're having people over. Bring over whoever you want whenever you want. Just shoot me a text so I know to be decent." Every time he would agree to do so and then just show up with friends and no warning again the next time. I was getting frustrated but kept reiterating myself to him, and he kept saying he would warn me next time. To make things better, or is it worse, our entrance opened up right into the kitchen/living room. So the first thing his friends would see as they walked in was my big, blindingly pale, bearded, almost naked self lounging on the couch. Imagine walking into your home to see a fat, tattooed Viking laying in full view in a "draw me like one of your French girls" pose. They must have found it awkward, I know I did. And well, eventually I got tired of the situation and plotted some petty revenge with the hope that he would get the point. The next time my brother showed up with a few friends and I was in my underwear, I just sat there. For the next 3 or so hours, I just sat in the middle of the living room playing video games in my underwear, occasionally talking to the other people. No one said anything, but I'm sure everyone felt awkward about it. The time after that, the same thing, only this time I was watching Netflix. So 3 or 4 of us sitting in the living room watching Netflix with me in my underwear and everyone else fully dressed. Each time my brother brought people around unannounced, I refused to get dressed and no one ever called me out on it. If someone had called me out, I was planning to apologize and say I had no idea anyone was coming over, that I had to be decent for, and then get dressed and come back out like nothing happened. After a couple of weeks of this, my brother suddenly started texting me when he was bringing people over. Sometimes with a few minutes warning, sometimes with a few hours warning, so I would get up and put on some clothes. From then on, he never brought someone over unannounced again, and no one ever walked in to see me chilling in my underwear again. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, that was absolutely brilliant petty revenge. And I gotta say, I would be a little bit like OP in this situation. Not that I would chill in my underwear there, but I also don't like it when people make plans that sort of involve me, but don't really talk about it to me. I like to know exactly what is going on. Maybe that is because of my upbringing or something. Either way, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe even post a comment to help with the algorithm. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.